Welcome to NBA obituary season. I'd like to treat this a little bit differently, maybe than some others do. When I look at the West and I look at some of the potential endings and the ending we had last night in the first round for the Lakers, I'm more along the lines of like, hey, this conference is loaded. These top three teams are all pretty special. Okay, sorry. It didn't really work out. So what does it really mean? A lot of times I think I'm just going to look at it and be like, hey, you lost to a really good team. And I think in the case of Denver, LA, we'd all agree LA lost to a better team in Denver, right? It's not exactly breaking news. If you want to talk disappointing, if the Celtics can't get out of the East this year, even with a Porzingis injury, that does change things, limits some of the things they'd be able to do. A stretch five that the other big guys that they would go up against and would have to chase a little bit more than, say, the way they use Horford, although he's certainly a stretch five as well. Some of the lineups where they played both of them together, and the fact that Horford at this age is now going to take on all these primary minutes until we know what's going on with Porzingis long term here. But it didn't look good last night. But if Boston, with the way Milwaukee has fallen apart here, with the 4-5 matchup probably not scaring you all that much, if Philly were to come back somehow, I'm just throwing them into the mix. But if Philly with Embiid going, like, what would he look like in another couple weeks? Would he be in better shape? Would it be worse shape physically? And then ultimately, it really is Brunson, because they look like the best remaining team in the East. You'd think Boston would have enough perimeter defenders to be able to throw at Brunson to win 4 of 7 games against New York. That's how I feel today, but the Porzingis thing limits them. But as far as bad endings, like, there's a potential bad ending for Boston that'd be way worse than any of these teams that I see in the West because of the competition. So let's talk about the Lakers, because the Lakers are a team that is covered obsessively locally, which makes sense, but also nationally. It's kind of the way it plays out, with LeBron still being the biggest brand star in the league. It makes sense. Locally, it's kind of like the Armageddon stuff the next day. Like, all these things need to change. I always joke about how we shouldn't actually talk about the Super Bowl after the Super Bowl. Like, we should talk about it a week later. Clearly that would never happen, but like, whatever happens in that game, the recency bias of all of these eliminations that are about to happen in the playoffs, it's like that 24 hours, everybody's so upset that you start like almost becoming irrational about some of the things you think some of the things you think the team needs to do, right? But if we look at the different things the Lakers are looking at here, whether it's Darvin Ham's future, LeBron's contract, trade partners, potential stuff that could happen this summer, D'Angelo Russell's player option, there's a few things here that I want to touch base on. All right. So the rumors of what LeBron wants are 3 years, $164 million. That's what we know, at least publicly, is sort of like, yeah, that's what it'll take for a new deal for him. I thought he was really good last night. The shot making for him is incredible. Once AD got hurt with that shoulder injury, which at the time you were like, wait, he's down from that collision, but shoulders can be a little weird. I thought LeBron cranked it up. He knew. Then I was worried, wait, is he going to crank it up during him trying to save this with AD lingering here? Is he going to be worn out at the end? And he wasn't. He was still really good. So the production continues to be absurd for him. Season 21, Reggie Miller. It's the second best shooting percentage of his career at still a 30% usage rate. Something I was looking at him over the years where I felt like his 3-point attempt rate was going up. So if you look at how a guy plays, it'd be like, how often is he getting to the free throw line? How many of his attempts, what percentage of his attempts, overall shots, like say you're taking 10 shots a game, how many of those are threes? Well, he was trending towards leaning on the 3-point shot attempts more. But this year, it was the lowest 3-point attempt rate in 6 seasons, combining that with the best he's ever shot it from 3. So like, God. And he still has the ball all the time. He does float a bit. And he still puts up the numbers. The defense is not a plus. If he's on the ball and he has to do something, okay. But if he's off the ball, he's not going to move a ton. This isn't new. But I've just heard some people, say, oh, he's still out there as this two-way play. He's not. He's not any of those things. And it's okay, because I can't even believe he's this offensively at 39. The energy he needs to battle with Aaron Gordon on the glass in some of these moments late, it's not a great match for LeBron, and there's just some guys too that's like, look, I think I probably need to use more of my energy on offense anyway to get us a better look than making sure I'm dialed into every single rotation. And as I say these things, you're like, wait, did someone in the media both praise and critique a high-profile athlete? Has that ever happened before? Yeah, that's what we just did. We just did. We're giving you the full scope. So I wouldn't love the idea, as great as the production has been, of giving LeBron James $164 million because of like, what's it going to look like in 3 years? Now, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have thought it was going to look like this. But I mean, look, at some point, I think we have to be reasonable. Like, what will that look like? What will that number mean? And will it matter? Or are the Lakers like, I don't know, who cares? So it'll look bad in 3 years. Maybe these next two, if you add a piece here, tweak there, this team can really contend in the West. It could also, and it likely is, a public tactic of negotiating. Like, wait, just throw out what the maximum number is there and then let them know that that's what we want. And, we'll see what happens. I'd love if you were running the Lakers, if you were Jeannie Buss, if you're Pelinka, just go, hey, we want you back. We're going to pay. Is there any way we don't have to pay you like the full thing? Because of the other teams that have cap space, do you want to go to Detroit, Orlando, Toronto, Utah, Charlotte? Philly's out there lingering with a huge amount of cap space, but would LeBron going to Philly, whatever else they did, which is unknown at this point, would that actually be better positioned for LeBron to continue to contend for championships than what the Lakers have right now? I don't know. That's a tough one to hitch your wagon to Embiid, although you could say the same thing about AD, but he ended up healthier this season. So that's just the results of this season. You could argue, all right, well, in the East, he'd probably have an easier path than what we have right now. It feels like a stacked West. So I'd be shocked if he opts out and leaves. He may opt out of his player option. He has to make that decision by June 29th, but he could opt out of it, get the new deal, or he could opt into it and then add 2 years in the extension. And with LeBron, there's always going to be the crazy stories like 2 years ago when he was kind of floating the idea of like, yeah, I see myself coming back to Cleveland one more time. Well, that was about leverage. That was about putting pressure on the Lakers. He loves doing this stuff. Sometimes I think it's a complete waste of energy and totally pointless. Or like when he was flirting with New York, if that's even what it was, before the trade deadline, he, of course, wanted them to trade a pick, throws on the Knicks towel. We all talk about it for 2 days, as if any front office would be like, well, kind of on the fence if we should do anything. Wait, he put on a Knicks towel? All right, let's move him first for Gafford. Knicks towel. The funny thing about not using any assets to just add to a team that probably was going to beat any of the best teams in the West anyway, and maybe you disagree with that, but we'll get to it, is that now they're armed with maybe enough stuff to outbid somebody else for the next guy that is on the move, whether it's the rumor names that we know about. Seems like everybody thinks Trae Young's done at Atlanta. That's just what everybody keeps saying, but you're reading the same stuff I am. I've not heard anything definitive on it. The Donovan Mitchell thing, where it feels like Cleveland's going to be forced to figure this out to get some kind of asset for somebody back that no one is predicting that he would stay in Cleveland long term. And Zach LaVine, who's always been a LeBron favorite. Maybe there's some kind of play there, and maybe you win the trade bidding because you didn't make a move before the deadline and be impatient, and now they have more picks to go ahead and do this. There's also the names out there because I still feel like we're on the cusp of something weird, whether it's teams that feel like, hey, we've kind of been the same for a while. Maybe it's time to shake it up, or the player that we don't know yet that's going to do something is going to say, I actually want out of here because it has been quiet for a while. Really, it's going back to Harden the beginning of the year. That's a long time for it to be a quiet season as far as the demands are concerned. So I still think we have the potential just based on the amount of time that has gone by that it's been kind of quiet. So who knows? Who knows what is out there as an option that we're not even thinking about today at the end of April, beginning of May. But the default setting for NBA GMs is usually, of any of the sports, tweak here, tweak there, but we're going to run it back. We're just going to run it back. We don't like, hey, look, we may need to move on from somebody, but we don't even like what we're being offered. So we're just going to run it back. And if we're healthier, we'll just be better. That's the assumption a lot of front offices make. The D'Angelo Russell one's interesting, even though it's minor in the grand scheme of the LeBron stuff and some of the other things we're going to talk about, because with an $18.7 million player option for D'Angelo Russell, I'm like, there's no way he's not picking that up. It's a lot of money for him. Well, he played really well second half of the season, like really steady, steadier than I thought he could play. Don't love all the playoff stuff. We know the goods, we know the bads. I don't love an unsupervised D'Angelo Russell with a new team in their cap space, as opposed to supervised D'Angelo Russell, where he knows he still kind of has to keep it in line a little bit with the Lakers, with guys like LeBron and AD there. But now I look at it going, like, he might be somebody that they regret not having if he opts out of that player option, because of these teams that we talked about that have cap space. Somebody is going to spend their space on some of these guys. The Dillon Brooks lesson that we all learned last year. Darvin Ham. Before I get to him in this season, I want to bring up the Phoenix thing one more time because as Bill and I were doing the Sunday pod talking about Phoenix and how disappointing that is, and that may be the team that can't look at themselves and say, whatever, we lost a really good team. Like, we're fine. They're not fine. But Shams having these reports up, both involved in the Lakers report for The Athletic and then the Phoenix stuff, like this was all ready to go. And this is the part of the coaching thing I think is incredibly unfair because it's like, okay, so the person who's in charge, although when you're an NBA coach, it's hard for you to be in charge the way someone is in charge at your 9 to 5. But like, think about your life. And I don't like doing this with sports because they're just different than us and they're more special than us. But you think you'd get a quote from anybody in your office about the supervisor that wouldn't be glowing at some point over the year? Like, of course, there are times, and these guys are completely different because they are so special at what they do. The minute they have some doubt with you, they're like, oh, well, I didn't love when the coach did this. I love that part of the Phoenix story was that Vogel yelled at them after scoring single digits against the Clippers. And it was like, yeah, I didn't feel real. It's like, you guys didn't crack 10 points against the Clippers to start that game. Like, but you don't like the message? Right? If you can find someone else to blame other than yourself, human nature is we'll always take that path. So even though I don't like the comp of the everyday thing, knowing that in this case, really the employees, the players, are some of the most talented individuals in the world doing something that a lot of people are paying attention to, I think the comp works in that it feels unfair to the coaches because it's the same things happening to Ham towards the end of the season, different moments of the season. And then there was the big wrap up in The Athletic today about all the things that he didn't do right. It's like, okay, here we go. Now, I thought Ham struggled with the rotations, but I also thought they brought in a lot of players of free agency that all expected to play. So instead of burying a couple of them, I think Ham was just trying to kind of figure things out and hope it would be a little bit better or quicker. But like the thing you figure out with Cam Reddish is like, oh, this is why he was available for this amount of money. This is why Jackson Hayes is available for this amount of money. The Prince thing doesn't make a ton of sense. Worst plus minus, I believe, on the Lakers this year. And he moved off of it. He benched Reeves, which didn't make sense. He was late on the Rui thing. But once they added Rui and they kind of knew who they were a really good offense to close the NBA regular season. They finished 19-7. And like I said at the beginning, they're a good team. They're a good team this year. Ended up being a little bit better than I thought they would be. But if they had had a better, tighter rotation and Ham had figured these things out earlier, what does it mean? Maybe they get to a 5 seed. Maybe it's a 4 seed. Maybe they play the Clippers in the first round. And if they're hurt, they get through the first round. Then they play OKC. I'm not picking them against OKC. No way. So then it means what? The Lakers get through the first round. They had a better seed. Ham was more steady as a coach. He was better with his rotations. He didn't experiment as much, but they lost to OKC in 6. But a game here, a game there, bounced that. Maybe they're this close to the Western Conference Finals. The point is that there are a lot of endings in the playoffs, and I think it'll happen this year in the West, where you're like, oh, man, what is wrong with us? And the real answer to that, it's not so much what's wrong with you. It's just that other team was better. Denver's better than LA. I think we have enough evidence now to prove that Denver's just a brutal matchup for the Lakers. Even though the Lakers led so much of this series, they're just not at their level. I don't think we need to see more games of it. I don't think it's just about luck. I don't think it's about coaching. The closing minutes are just stronger with the activity of the Denver players than those of the guys on the Lakers. But if the Lakers had made it through against an easier first round and then lost later in the playoffs, then it would be packaged as if they were a little bit closer. And then you would just run them all back, right? Run it back, make that trade. And then who knows? Are they the favorites in the West? When the packaging can be completely different, but it likely means you're just the same team. And this same team moving forward, whatever the LeBron extension ends up being, and maybe with that big piece that's out there, if they want to move all the picks again, which just means they're completely mortgaging all of this post-LeBron stuff, and maybe means the Lakers picks are more valuable in the trade market because they're like, wait, if they're trading us unprotected future first down the road, and then LeBron's post-40, AD's health stuff, like those could actually be spun depending on the protection as like, man, those picks might be something I want to get into with a GM that is in a steady situation, who's going to be there long haul or just took the job. But that's always my point with this NBA obituary season. It's like, all right, so you lost in the first round. You're going to sit there and say like, oh, we made it to the Western Conference Finals. You might be the exact same team. The path was different, and it might not mean anything different about who you actually are as a franchise.